She insulted an ordinary customer only to discover he owned the place, and was Clint Eastwood. The midday sun poured through the large windows of Sierra Grill, a modest but bustling restaurant in Carmel by the Sea, California. It wasn't a high-end place, but it had its charm, a little rustic, a little modern, the kind of spot locals loved, especially on a warm Thursday afternoon. For Megan, a 23-year-old waitress trying to make ends meet, charm wasn't enough to soften her frustration. Her shift had been chaos since the moment she clocked in. "Table 7 needs extra dressing," called a fellow server. Megan didn't even glance up as she scribbled the latest order onto her notepad. Her ponytail swayed as she rushed between tables, juggling complaints about undercooked steaks, split checks, and forgotten drink orders. To top it all off, she had dealt with 3 rude customers in the past hour, each leaving her with nothing but a few coins as a tip. By the time a man in his 80s strolled in and quietly took a seat at a corner table, Megan was already on edge. He looked like someone who didn't care much for appearances. Slightly wrinkled flannel shirt, faded jeans, and a well-worn Stetson resting on the table. His boots looked like they'd seen decades of dirt roads. Megan gave him a quick once-over, her lips curling into a faint smirk. "Great," she muttered under her breath. "Another one who's probably going to order a coffee and leave me $1. But she couldn't avoid him forever. Her co-worker nudged her, whispering, "You've got table 12. Megan sighed and grabbed her notepad, pasting on her practiced smile as she approached. "What can I get you today?" she asked, her tone teetering on impatience. The man looked up, his sharp eyes scanning her face for a moment. There was something strikingly familiar about him, but Megan couldn't quite place it. "Just a burger," he said calmly. His voice was low and gravelly, carrying a weight that seemed to command respect. "Burger, got it? Anything else?" Megan asked, her pen tapping against the notepad. "No, ma'am," he replied, tipping his hat slightly. She rolled her eyes as she walked back to the kitchen, muttering, "Ma'am? Really?" under her breath. But as she entered the kitchen, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about him stood out. He wasn't like the other customers, rude, demanding, or dismissive. There was a quiet confidence about him, almost as if he was watching and waiting for something. Megan shrugged it off. It was just another table, another order, another $1. But she had no idea just how wrong she was. Megan returned to table 12 with the man's burger. After a few minutes, the plate clattered onto the table with less care than she usually gave. She was running on fumes, her smile more forced than ever. The man didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't let it show. "Here you go," Megan said, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she placed the ketchup bottle next to his plate. "Anything else?" The man glanced at the burger, then back at her. "No, this looks just fine. Thank you." His words were polite, but there was a firmness in his tone that made Megan feel oddly self-conscious. She lingered for a moment, unsure why she hadn't already moved on to the next table. Something about his demeanor annoyed her. Maybe it was a calmness, the unshakable composure. Everyone else in the restaurant was either complaining, snapping their fingers, or rushing around in a frenzy, and studied her for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Fair enough," he said with a small nod. "We all have tough days." There was no sarcasm in his tone, no condescension, just quiet understanding. That, somehow, irritated Megan even more. She expected him to weigh her off, maybe grumble about the service like other customers did when they sense an attitude. Instead, he simply pulled out his wallet, placed a crisp $100 bill on the table, and stood up. "Keep the change," he said, adjusting his hat. Megan stared at the bill, then back at him. "Wait, this is way too much," she said, her voice laced with suspicion. "Are you messing with me?" The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Nope, just a tip. A tip more than 5 times the cost of his meal." Megan was speechless before she could say anything else. He turned toward the door, pausing only when another server hurried up to him, suddenly looking nervous. Mr. Eastwood?" the young man stammered. "It's an honor, sir." Megan's stomach dropped. Her heart skipped a beat. "Eastwood? As in Clint Eastwood?" Her eyes widened as she slowly turned toward the man she had just spent the past 15 minutes subtly mocking. It couldn't be. But now, as she really looked at him, really saw him, it clicked. The sharp eyes, the gravelly voice, the quiet, effortless confidence. Clint, freaking. Eastwood. He gave the server a polite nod before glancing back at Megan, his expression unreadable. "Nice meeting you," he said casually before stepping out into the California sun. Megan remained frozen in place, her mouth slightly open. Danny appeared at her side, staring after him. "Told you he looked familiar," he muttered. Megan groaned, burying her face in her hands. "I just sassed Clint Eastwood." Danny snickered. "Yep, and he still left you $100. Megan exhaled sharply, shaking her head. She had spent the entire interaction assuming he was just another old man with a cowboy hat, completely unaware she had been serving a living legend. Lesson learned: never judge a book by its cover, especially when the book is Clint Eastwood. And keeping her head down, focusing on her tasks. Every time the front door opened, she tensed, half expecting to see Clint Eastwood walking again, this time with a serious expression and a pointed complaint about her behavior. But the hours passed and nothing happened. By the afternoon, Megan had almost convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, he had let it go. Maybe he was one of those rich, eccentric owners who didn't concern themselves with the daily operations of their business. Maybe she'd just gotten lucky. Then Carol called her into the office. Megan's stomach plummeted. She swallowed hard and stepped inside, trying to appear calm. Carol sat at her desk, arms crossed, a strange smile on her face. "You had quite the interaction yesterday, didn't you?" Carol said, leaning back in her chair. Megan's throat went dry. Yeah, about that, Carol held up a hand. "Relax. You're not in trouble." Megan blinked. "I'm not." "Nope." Carol shook her head, looking oddly amused. "But Mr. Eastwood did leave a message for you." Megan's pulse quickened. "A message?" Carol reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded note, sliding it across the desk. With hesitant fingers, Megan picked it up and unfolded the paper. "A job's what you make of it. Don't let one bad day define you. P.S. You make a damn good burger." It wasn't signed, but it didn't have to be. Megan let out a breath. She didn't realize she'd been holding. Carol watched her reaction carefully. He's not a man who wastes words. If he took the time to write that, it means something. Megan nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around the note. She had expected anger, maybe even punishment, but instead, she got something else entirely. Understanding. A second chance. For the first time in a long while, Megan felt something shift inside her. Maybe it was embarrassment, maybe it was gratitude, or maybe it was just a realization that she had let her attitude define her for too long. Either way, she knew one thing for certain. The next time Clint Eastwood walked into the Sierra Grill, she'd be ready. She hadn't realized how much her own attitude had been weighing her down. For months, she had gone through the motions, showing up to work with a chip on her shoulder, waiting for the day to be over. But now, something had shifted. The simple act of being patient, of offering kindness instead of irritation, made her job feel lighter. It didn't go unnoticed, either. Carol started giving her approving nods when she passed by. Danny, who had always teased her about being grumpy, joked that he barely recognized her anymore. Even the regulars seemed to respond differently, leaving bigger tips, asking for her section, smiling more. And then, one afternoon, about a month after Clint's visit, Carol pulled her aside again. "Megan," she said, crossing her arms with a smirk, "you've been different lately." Megan stiffened. "Different good or different bad?" Carol chuckled. "Good. Really good, actually. So good that Mr. Eastwood called this morning and asked if you'd be interested in a promotion." Megan's heart stopped. What?" "He thinks you have leadership potential." Carol's smirk softened into something more sincere. "Said he saw something in you. Assistant manager position just opened up, and he wants you to take it." Megan couldn't speak. The girl who once rolled her eyes at customers, who had nearly let her attitude cost her a job, was now being offered a promotion. She swallowed hard, remembering Clint's words. Every interaction's an opportunity. Use it well. Maybe, just maybe, she finally had. This feels like a perfect ending for a YouTube story video. Uplifting, reflective, and with a strong takeaway message. The transformation of Megan from an indifferent employee to someone who finds meaning in her work makes the story powerful and relatable. If you're planning to turn this into a YouTube video, you might want to add some cinematic visuals. Perhaps scenes of a quiet, dimly lit diner, close-ups of Megan's expressions, and maybe even a silhouette of Clint Eastwood walking away. A soft, inspiring background score could enhance the impact. Would you like any refinements to the script, or are you happy with how it flows?